He was your local Jack the Ripper. He's not known to have killed other people, but he was a myth. He skipped town. He skipped out.
Who, since the time that he fled, he has never held a job. And he's fled to various countries all over Europe using planes, trains, and other methods of transportation. Has a magnificent house in the Bordeaux region of France, which is not, an inconsiderable expense.
I believe that he knew that if he was brought back, he was going to spend the rest of his life in jail. And that's what needed to happen.
So it was a shockwave here because time had sort of forgotten him and put him aside with all the other things going on. So when the story just exploded.
This is 3411 Ray Street. This is the same building that Ira Einhorn lived in with Holly Maddox. A lot of students that live on this block now, many of them are completely unaware that one of the most notorious murders in the city of Philadelphia happened right here.
Ira Einhorn was this iconic hippie, this Greenwich Village hippie in Philadelphia, which had very few other high-profile people of Ira's stature and of Ira's intellect.
Ira Einhorn graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 1961, became a professor, and heavily involved in civic causes. Immersing himself in the counterculture, he became known as a guru.
I first became aware of Ira probably in 1973 or 74. I was involved in politics, but I worked for a civic organization. And the head of the civic organization brought Ira in to talk because Ira had charisma and shtick. And he was magnetic in his personality. People began to take Ira seriously when establishment folks invited him to speak. A high-profile person, Earth Day, he takes a lot of credit for, whether deservedly, I suspect not. But in the 70s, he gained a certain credibility in Philadelphia as a spokesperson for the extreme left. And I don't mean political left, I mean intellectual left.
Ira was a flim-flam man. He had a good gift of gab, and certain kinds of people could be quite taken with him and all of his scientific mumbo-jumbo. He would talk about this and that, and conspiracies and things like that. He had a good line and he had a good rap.
In 1965, Holly Maddox began school at Bryn Mawr College. The Tyler, Texas native is drawn to the counterculture of the 60s. Holly meets Ira Einhorn in 1972 and moves into his apartment almost immediately. This begins a tumultuous on and off relationship. In 1977, Holly meets another man and breaks it off with Einhorn. September 9th, 1977 is the last time Holly Maddox is ever seen.
I was in the homicide division, which would have been in the early parts of 1979.
In March of 1979, Mike Chitwood receives Holly's case.
And I get a call to go up to the commissioner's office. And inside Commissioner O'Neill's office were two members of an investigative team, both of whom were former FBI agents.
The private investigators were hired by the Maddox family and had worked Holly's case for more than a year. Einhorn claimed that Holly had run off, but called to tell him that she was safe. The investigators discovered that Einhorn had physically abusive relationships with several women, including Holly.
And they handed me an investigation that they had done. And I knew Einhorn from the prior occasions he ran for mayor. So from a media perspective, he had an interesting persona. I met with the two investigators and they gave me their report. But it was very, very well done. It was like a book. First thing I said is that Ira Einhorn killed Holly Maddox. And Ira Einhorn probably buried Holly Maddox's body in a closet which was outside his apartment proper. When you got done reading the book, it was almost like an Alfred Hitchcock book.
During the investigation, police found that several neighbors in Einhorn's apartment complex had complained to management about a stench and a sludge-like substance seeping from Ira's floor through the ceiling of his neighbor below.
I met with all the muckety mucks. I called the medical examiner's office. I did everything and explained what we were trying to do. And basically, we went in with the lab, the crime lab. We went in with the search to pull all the floorboards down, rip all the floorboards up, and to see if we couldn't find her head, hair, and blood. Because all the information we had, that the body decomposed and the fluids went down the wall, through the floorboard.
March 28, 1979, police go to Einhorn's apartment with a search warrant.
We went in and eventually we searched the house. It's a very, very small apartment. All types of books. Einhorn was a slob. He was dirty. He was just a slob. We were focusing on an outside closet. First thing I noticed, the padlock, the door's padlocked. And I asked him, did he have the keys? He said, no, he didn't have the keys. So I got a crowbar and gently removed the hasp and the lock. One of the boxes had on there Maddox, and then it was a handbag, and in the handbag was her identification, her library card, stuff that you just would not leave behind if you were going to run away. So we started searching, and the closet itself, you could smell. So in fact, when you first open up the door, you can smell decomposition of a body. The steamer trunk was laying on some type of rug. I went down through, and then the next thing I noticed, there were plastic bags from Sears. Underneath the plastic bags was foam. So I started gently moving the foam aside, and I saw a hand sticking out. What you could see was a flannel shirt. I turned to Ira and Einhorn, who was standing at the door. I said, looks like we found Holly.
And he said to me, you found whatever you found.
You found what you found. I think at that moment he realized he was done until he got out on bail.
Einhorn is charged with first-degree murder and hires former DA Arlen Specter, who was in a private practice. Specter convinces a judge to set bail at just $40,000.
Ira got his bail cut down. First-degree murder is hard to get. It's hard to get bail on that one. You know, O.J. Simpson didn't even get bail for first-degree murder charges.
Einhorn only has to put up 10% of the bail, or just $4,000.
People blasted him about it, but Arlen was doing his job. Arlen was in private practice as a lawyer, and he went in there and advocated for his client.
I can remember saying it to the DA. He's gone.
Einhorn's trial date is set for March of 1981, and he hires Norris Gelman as his attorney.
They served the subpoena, wasn't there. And then we went over to the location and saw everything was gone.
Einhorn is nowhere to be found.
Then we did an investigation, said he was with a woman. He left with the woman. Can you describe the woman? Well, the description was Holly Maddox to a T. But it wasn't Holly Maddox, but it was another woman that he hooked up with. And apparently he went to Europe.
From 1981 to 1986, Einhorn is located in Ireland but never captured.
Rob tells the story of one of the most wanted men in the history of Philadelphia crime. His name, Ira Einhorn.
At that point, nobody knew where Ira was, but he lived under various aliases and things like that. And while he was distinctive looking, he wasn't somebody who didn't look like they could have been born in Europe or Ireland or someplace like that. So he wasn't, and he wasn't a terrorist. He was a murder suspect, domestic murder.
In 1988, Einhorn escapes arrest in Sweden, and in 1991, Lynn Abraham is elected DA.
I was the one who coined the phrase, Lynn Abraham is very much a lady in waiting, waiting for Ida to get her hands around Ira's neck, you know.
In a rare move, Einhorn is tried in absentia in 1993.
I think we've proven that Einhorn murdered Holly Maddox in that apartment, put her body in a trunk, and kept it there for a year and a half until the police came in there and discovered it.
The trial is held in City Hall, where no cameras are allowed.
It was a bizarre scene. There was an empty chair there for the defendant. They had two defense lawyers there. They brought in people to testify, and that Ira was in flight, and that obviously that showed a consciousness of guilt and things like that. He skipped town. It's fait accompli that he was going to be convicted.
The medical examiner tells the jury that he believes Holly was beaten to death by Einhorn. A man she was dating says she feared Ira would kill her. Former neighbors and friends testify about the stench in the apartment and the domestic abuse.
The detective spoke to some first-floor residents of this building.
I'm absolutely 100% sure
That he did it.
absolutely
A witness claims to have spotted Holly after she was deemed missing.
Alive and well, and creating a disturbance.
Long after she was allegedly murdered.
Months. Now, and I'm not going to say long, but I'm going to say months.
September 30th, 1993, Einhorn is found guilty of first-degree murder, and his enigma continues to grow. He is dubbed the Unicorn Killer because Einhorn translates to unicorn in some languages.
Then one day, he pops up captured. It was shocking. I mean, it was like, a legend coming out of nowhere. I mean, he'd become a legend because a lot of people knew him. And it was a shock that suddenly the French police had arrested Ira Einhorn and found him living like a country squire in the French countryside, living large, so to speak. And man, by that time, Lynn Abraham was the DA. And man, she said, man, we're bringing Ira back here to stand trial. I don't care who he is or how connected he is.
In 1997, Einhorn is arrested in France. He had been living under an alias and married to a woman named Annika Flauden.
I've never ever been able to relate to Ira as the accused murderer. It's something that is there, I know it, but it's in the outside world.
We've been together almost constantly, 14 years, 24 hours a day.
He has a rich wife.
How rich is she? That's my question.
Well, I've never counted her money, but I understand that the Flauden family apparently has some means of considerable amounts.
What would you say to the Maddox family? Is there anything you would say to the Maddox family?
The French government won't allow Einhorn to be extradited to the U.S. France abolished the death penalty and feared he might be executed if extradited, and wanted to ensure that Einhorn was granted another trial. In 1988, Pennsylvania passes a bill that would allow Einhorn to request another trial. In February of 1999, a French court rules that Einhorn can be extradited to the U.S.
The day he was being locked up, I was on the phone with his lawyer here, the new lawyer he had. The wires were breaking. Said, Einhorn just slashed his throat. The police are outside his door. They were waiting to lock him up and take him away. All of his appeals were done, kaput.
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic that it'll be brought back, but I'm also told that he attempted to kill himself today, which I think is a ruse to stay in France so he doesn't have to come back and face American justice.
July 20th, 2001, Einhorn is finally extradited to face a new trial. Einhorn's return is an international media circus. The Unicorn Killer has finally been captured. In October of 2002, Einhorn's new trial begins.
I mean, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck.
He thought that the CIA had killed Holly and set him up because he was aware of all these strange conspiracies going on. He was just very arrogant and said, I convened a conference of scientists. It was all a fraud. The DA was just nailing him.
I think he's putting on a show for the jury to show, oh, look at me, I'm intellectually analyzing this data.
I need to see how someone is really trying to frame me so I can say, oh, yes, that's a CIA tactic.
It was just a wild, wild scene. The family was up there, and they'd go on TV every night and give their own commentary. Ira's lawyer would come out and try to talk about it.
It leads to the theory that she did not decompose within the trunk. She was killed elsewhere, and her body was placed into that trunk not long before she was discovered there in March of 1979. Well, we talked about that stench before. People all over the apartment building were complaining. Ira was one of those people. We had testimony yesterday from the owner that they had to deal with a problem of dead squirrels in the roof.
Paul Harry, a former downstairs neighbor of Ira Einhorn's, told the jury that sometime in the fall of 1977, he heard the sounds of domestic violence coming from the apartment above, but he never called police. Harry told the jury that late in September, he started smelling a persistent foul odor coming from Einhorn's apartment and a foul rancid oozing he had to clean away. Einhorn, according to a former South Street book dealer, came looking for a how-to book on making mummies in the months before his arrest in the Maddox murder case. Cindy Grady told the jury Einhorn asked her to help him throw the steamer trunk into the Schuylkill River. telling her the KGB was out to get him because the trunk contained information on Russian psychic warfare. Boom, the jury deliberated only about 3 hours or maybe less. They came back and gave murder one again.
Einhorn is sentenced to life in prison.
I've never wanted him to be executed. I would prefer he live a long life and then get a lingering illness.
Holly and our parents can now truly rest.
I felt just so profound sadness when that verdict came down. Some of the evidence that was presented is devastating, but still, the actual proof and all these indications that there are doubts, they remain with me.
Einhorn is sent to the State Correctional Institute in Somerset, Pennsylvania. He dies in prison on April 3rd, 2020.
I always thought that his whole thing was an act, that he was in his own movie, and that he was the lead character. And that movie was always entertaining until it stopped being entertaining. And it started to be terrible. And I think once we found out that his girlfriend had been stuffed into a trunk and kept there for more than almost a year and a half, there's an evilness there that supersedes any good or creativity that you might have been able to impart. There's good in all of us, but when the bad is that overwhelming, it's hard to think of a person in any of them.